Hi, I'm Marcus from Bridge Harmony Mediation and Training Academy. Today we are bringing you a deep dive into mediation with the amazing
Hi, I'm Priyanka Pandit.
Bridging International Waters is all about sharing our own experiences from the UK and the amazing India about the mediation process, and we are doing lots of collaborative work to working with this amazing charity. Yeah, so let's get straight into it. Let's go. Priyanka,
Yes.
would you like to
Yes,
start us
we're going
off?
to go for it. Absolutely. We're going to do a deep dive in the mediation process. We've already spoken to you in our previous episodes about the importance of mediation, the values, give you an insight into the skill. What we're going to talk about today is the process itself. We're going to do a deep dive so that you understand how mediation actually unfolds as a process. I know it's informal. It doesn't, people believe it doesn't have a structure, but really it's a process. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down each stage of the process for you, and hopefully walk you through what, if you're participating in a mediation, what you can expect in a session of mediation. And we're going to discuss the structure that helps you to have these guided conversations. And we're going to show you how this process can actually create opportunities for resolution. How just the dialogue can unfold opportunities that you can now start to sort of see, to find solutions for by yourself. So we're going to walk you through the entire mediation process in this one. What do you, Marcus?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we are, let me just get the next slide. There we go. So the process is all about initiation, the commitment to take part in such a voluntary process. Now, it's all about agreeing to participate. If you've participated in mediation, and then it gives, I feel like in the mediations that I've done, it gives the other person that little bit of encouragement, really, that they are willing, the willingness to resolve the conflict of whatever may be that conflict.
True.
And the willingness alone is just a
True.
huge commitment from the parties to think, okay, I've decided I want to resolve the conflict. And I know sometimes
Yes.
people are maybe edged into that conflict, or you have to resolve this in mediation. So there is always that hesitance of, well, I've been forced to mediation, whether it's a family case, workplace, commercial. We have to be here because I've been told to be here.
True.
There is that side. So the purpose of it is to resolve conflict and to make, hopefully, I always say hopefully, a greater outcome for the parties involved, whatever the conflict may be. The process of it and the purpose of it and the whole structure of mediation is to, well, prevent conflict from going forward, try and get a mutual agreement, have your say in uninterrupted time, to have your voice heard overall, have your voice heard, and let's see what we can resolve with the conflicts. For me, as a person, it's about hearing what the other side has to say. That really does flip the perspective of
It does.
the whole process, literally. And I mean, the ground rules and the structure. So in the single session, so you'd have a one-to-one prior. You'd obviously reach out before, have the conversation on the telephone or an email, or you've been
Correct.
contacted for it as a third party, or they've come direct.
True.
Um, so basically, initial contact, then you see them one-to-one. You explain, for example, this is a process of where you get your say in a safe space, which is a confidential space, where it's without prejudice, as long as you're not breaking any safeguarding rules, harm to adults or children, or any legal activities such as money laundering. It stays within the mediation and it stays confidential. You'll have around 45 minutes to an hour to discuss in your one-to-one what that looks like. The ground rules are quite clear. Uh, quite clear. to ensure respectful communication throughout. Confidentiality and voluntary participation are obviously clarified, and obviously the stage of the initiation does build trust. I've mentioned a tiny bit about the one-to-one, but Frank is going to take you a little bit further from the one-to-one to the joint discussions.
Yes, and yeah, absolutely, Marcus. It's very critical to set those initial ground rules, because once those parties understand in the initial session and in the opening statement of the mediator what the process is about, and once the parties, of course, before we get into the room, there's a lot of coordination, like Marcus said, so everybody has a broad idea of what the conflict is about, what the parties sort of, have already shared with us in confidence. And when we're in the room together, when we set the ground rules and we initiate that discussion formally, it really sets the tone of how this mediation is going to unfold. So what we jump into then is, after this initial introduction and setting of the ground rules, etc., what we will do is we will encourage the parties to share in an open, safe forum their own views on the conflict. And over here, if you've got parties who are doing this for the first time or are hesitant, or sometimes parties who have very high emotions, so they're very jumpy, or they're you hear something and they're very reactive in their approach, this is when we'll sort of emphasize and remind the parties that it is important to allow everyone to speak without interruption. And this sort of helps us balance the room, balance expectations as well in the participation going forward. And we spoke about listening skills in one of our episodes, and that becomes extremely important to employ in joint discussions, because this is where, the party has really sort of shed all other apprehension and taken the initiative to actually talk about the conflict face to face without any third party interference or advice here. So really what you're going to gain from this interaction in a joint session is you're really going to understand what the real concerns are, not just what's put on paper, not what rights the parties have to exercise before any forums. You're really going to get the crux of what the conflict is. So it's very important to pay attention in these joint discussions and try to understand the conflict and the perspective of the speaker. And this will help you identify the real issues and concerns. So it becomes very clear to the room of, what the issues and concerns for both sides are. And after you've respectfully heard everybody in this room, it sort of sets the stage for caucuses, which Marcus will walk us through. But it also, as a mediator, this is where everything that I would want to understand as a mediator about the conflict that I'm attempting to resolve or help the parties resolve sort of clarifies, because now we don't just have cursory information, we have in-depth information from the party in conflict. We understand what their real issues and concerns are, which they've put before the open forum. Of course, there will be, other confidential information that they will disclose or share with us only in confidence in separate individual sessions. But at least there's a more clearer idea of why we're all doing this, why we're together. And in many conflicts, especially in family conflicts, you will see that this kind of discussion is happening for the first time since the parties got into a dispute or got into the conflict. And so this joint discussion also sort of becomes an entry gate to having an open discussion once again, to sort of get over the conflict.
Yeah, well explained, absolutely well explained. And that's the joint session. So the private meetings is basically the strategic planning of what happens to give you a full insight of the process. So all issues as regards to all this, I was going to say traumas, but some of it can be quite traumatic
Yes.
from what the clients have been through.
Yes.
It's very purpose-led. So again, the mediator does get to say if they feel safe. They can feel like they will be safe enough for the mediation to go ahead. We have spoke gently about the types of mediation of shuttle mediation and or joint mediation face to face, but all issues that are really highly sensitive will be explored to find the root. And what I'm finding recently is, again, again, a recent one this week, the issues that have been explained in the one-to-ones, this online when I was being looked at as if to say, these issues I'm referring to, why doesn't the other party, or why can't you speak about these issues to bring them up? It's a confidential process. So whatever you do say in your one-to-one, we can't bring up what you've disclosed in your one-to-one. And I need to make that clear. So you have a one-to-one with a mediator, it's confidential. You talk about highly sensitive issues. We can support you in the progress. The mediator then in a joint session can't bring up what you've said because it's confidential unless you bring it up yourself. I mean, a mediator can open every door on the corridor to maybe guide or aid, and how does you think and feel about that, and what was happening for you at the start of that process. We cannot, under any obligation, talk about or break confidentiality. And then it's the insights from these meetings, it's the progress of the discussion, it's what happens, it's giving you that reassurance that when you do go forward, you will be spoken to, and the joint session will be, a confidential process as well. So it gives you that support. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, and it's very important to understand this confidential disclosure bit, because when you have that level of confidential in-depth discussion in your private caucuses with your mediator can really help you see through certain things which you were otherwise sort of not able to see because you're in the conflict. And remember, we spoke about how high our emotions can be when you're the person who's actually facing the conflict. So what the joint discussions and the separate caucuses really help us do as mediators is identify if there's any scope for any agreement to be sort of arrived at. So we're constantly trying to identify and help the parties identify for themselves if there's any ground for a common or a joint resolution, which we'd like to call agreement building. So what this does is, once we understand that each party is now sort of understood the perspective from the other side, we'll bring them together again in a joint session, of course, checking with their comfort, to now have collaborative, more forward-thinking discussions. It's not about going around in circles. Of course, we've all listened attentively. We now understand each other better. So now we're not, and the idea, the purpose is always in mediation to separate the people from the problem. So the idea is to be hard at the problem and not on the people. So when we talk about collaborative agreement building discussions, we're talking about brainstorming together what the possible solutions could be to this conflict, exploring how they would play out in real life, focusing on how it could practically be implemented, whether there's going to be any roadblocks in the implementation of what is being proposed. And of course, as a mediator, it becomes very important because as the parties are thinking for themselves, it's very natural and human for us to sort of safeguard our interests first, right? So the mediator will, during these agreement building discussions, ensure that whatever's going forward, whatever's been proposed or agreed upon even, is clear and is fair to everyone involved. So neither party sort of feels like they've been sidestepped or shortchanged in the process. And only when everyone agrees that this is, that they're each happy with the process, or they're happy with the solution that they've figured out for themselves, and they all agree that this can practically be implemented, and this can put a stop to the conflict. It can completely resolve it. There are no loose ends left to deal with anything. at the end of all of that, we'll put it down in what we'd like to call a settlement agreement or a written agreement. It is only once this agreement is signed on that anything that's written there becomes binding on the parties. So even up until this point where we're just talking about possible solutions, nothing is binding on the parties. This is very important to understand, because many times people feel like they're being rushed and pushed into something that they sort of can't walk out of. But the beauty of mediation as a process is that you can walk out of it at any point in time. You can also, at the end of the process, agree to disagree, which means you can choose not to enter into an agreement. So it's absolutely free and voluntary, and it's not compulsory or mandatory for you to have an agreement even at the end of the process. So only once everyone agrees and decides that they want to put their agreement in writing, that is when we'll move forward with the written agreement.
Well explained and well explored. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, just going with the agreement, the structure, the way it's just been all outset. I mean, I know these episodes are short and we're trying to cram the key points in.
Yes.
We could talk about this for a couple of hours we could do a full 4 or 5 day training course on it, but we should just get the couple of key highlights.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that would be interesting. That would be really fun. I think that's another idea, Marcus. At the end of these episodes, I think we'll do that. That will be the next thing we do together. But
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. So again, we've covered the structure, which provides that safe space that during your difficult times you kind of held, you supported. It's clear how the participants move from one to another to resolve the conflicting issues to the resolution process. And
correct.
again, it is a voluntary process. I mean, you can have the agreements legally binding as well if you wanted to.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. In fact, many countries have their own laws that recognize settlement agreements or mediation agreements that are entered into by parties. So they have a legal backing by the court system of your country. So even execution or calling upon someone to then perform on that agreement is possible to do. And the beauty of that is actually the court is never going to sort of ask you anything that happened in the background, which was discussed in the mediation process. The focus then is only on the agreement that has been recorded. So the confidentiality remains intact in perpetuity.
Yeah. So anything you do say mediation can't be used in the court process. But if you've both
Yes,
agreed that outcomes can be presented in the court of law, then that's between you both.
that's between you both. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So
It's
again,
really transformative. I mean, this entire process, and I'd like to talk about the creative problem solving here. I think, in all in whatever years I've been in practice in, the most creative solutions can really be put to light and implemented only through a mediation process. Because when you're logged, even if I have a creative solution to offer to the parties who are in litigation or in arbitration, there are so many limitations that these parties will sort of face with the laws and the norms that they generally have to follow. But the beauty of mediation is that you can anything that is not illegal, obviously, but anything that's creative and possible to do and works for you to resolve your own conflict, you're free to sort of do, which
yeah.
is, yeah.
So it's in the end of the day, they come up with their own solutions. It's
Absolutely.
not directed by any legal bodies. And if that works for you, that works for you, right? I
That
mean,
works for you. Absolutely.
I bet you've seen some outcomes, because I know I have, where you're thinking, well, that's interesting. And the mediator cannot tell you if that's a good outcome or not, as long as it works for you as well. So it's like,
Absolutely.
yeah. So how might structure help people navigate difficult conversations? Well,
Mm,
it gives them a step-by-step guide, really, of what's going to happen next. So it's like you have your one-to-one, you have your joint session. In the joint session, you have 15 minutes per person, or sometimes longer in other places, of uninterrupted time. You go into the discussion process and then highlight key points through that of what you'd like to talk about. And then I know some mediators like to call it spaghetti meatballs, where you go round and round and round and then go through the individual issues separately. And then after, let's say, between 1 and 4 hours, depending on if it's resolved in a day, usually it takes a couple of sessions. But after like your third session, you're usually kind of all resolved by then, if it gets to a third session. And then you do your summaries and outcomes, and yeah, it's really, really structured and constructive.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
Would you like to do the bridge
Amazing.
moment?
Yes. Oh, yes, it's the bridge moment. Process creates possibility. Oh my God. Yes, it absolutely does. Because as you were explaining your reflection there, Mark, I was thinking about how it is because of this structure that you sort of untangle all those clogged thoughts in your mind and try to sort of navigate and sort of see like a clearer picture of how you can sort of get beyond this, right? And it is only the process that allows that. This bridged moment could not be like more specific to what we've been talking about. It is literally the process that is creating these possibilities. It's nothing else. So as they say, trust the process. Mediation is one process that you must trust, right? We trust so many other things. So I think we should really give this a go for ourselves to really just put an end to all conflict that takes so much from us. So yeah. That's truly a bridge moment. It's a great bridge moment. Thank you for that one, Marcus.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us today and sitting down and create an episode together so amazingly. So thank you so much, Priyanka. I really
thank you. It's always a pleasure.
All right, we'll
see you in the next one.
Yeah, see you in the next one. All right, bye. Bye.